Good stuff. That's what I like to hear. Here we go. Ready to rock and roll.
I always like it when you hear a recording in progress.
You wish that they'd sort of try and do it as an English accent. I say recording in progress.
I wonder whether you can actually change the accent. I know on sat nav, like Waze.
Sat nav.
Yeah, sat nav.
Sounds like a dentist.
But I know with Waze you can change it, can't you?
You can.
You can have different accents and
yeah, Henry's got one. Hello everyone. I know we're sort of jabbering, but Henry's got one that does sound a bit sort of like he goes turn right.
Oh, quite.
Turn left.
Like assertive.
Yeah. It's like, oh, okay. I'm sure I will. I'm sure I will comply, sir.
Does it get annoyed if as you continue to
ignore it?
Ignore it. Oh, gee.
I have told you, for goodness sake. No. It's very sensible. Let me try to change it to another one. It just came out as very camp.
Well, good evening, those that are joining us. We'll just let everybody get in the room and then we'll get started. I hope everyone's had a good day. We're looking forward to this evening.
I've had a good day. Thank you very much. Very exciting day we've had. Oh,
yeah, it's been a very busy one.
But something exciting meeting that we had that you will find out about right at the end.
Yeah,
in fact.
I'll just lower that a little bit. Looking
in the camera. See you. Hang on. Shall I do that as well? Look at that.
Yeah, I think looking in the camera, it looks like it might be a bit high.
Yeah. I always think whenever I see these, and this is going to show my age, you might not remember this film because you're younger. There was a Clint Eastwood film, and it was called Play Misty for Me.
Oh,
and it was about he was some DJ, some stalker or murder or something.
My granddad told me about
that. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. But yeah,
and I have heard of the film.
Yeah. Play Misty for Me. Whenever I don't know why, but it's it sort of reminds me of
a DJ.
Yeah, of like sitting there alone at 10 o'clock at night with bugger all else going on, going, hello, let me play you some jazz or something. It's quite weird, really.
This is quite nice standing here for the people that are joining us. This is where we do our podcast from. So we host a podcast, Dentology. And this is the setup that we have for this. So we're actually in our office this evening doing this together. And the only time we normally do this would be when we record our podcast at Mason.
Or our dental update ones.
Yes, true. Very true.
We do some
work with dental update as well.
And it's always quite good. So we thank you all for joining on a Wednesday, isn't it? So I don't know where it was, but earlier on it was a very wet Wednesday, but actually it's sort of brightened up a bit, really.
It has.
Not bad at all.
Yeah.
We'll give it another minute or so. We reckon we always like to think that you shouldn't penalise the punctual?
Don't like to punish the punctual.
Punish the punctual. Penalise the punctual. Lots of P's going on in there, I'll tell you for sure.
There are.
But no, we can see people coming in. That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Yeah, which is very good.
I'm assuming you can all hear us, I suppose. Should be probably there's a chat box.
Yeah, there is a chat box. If you've got any questions as we go through, feel free to dump them in there. And if they're relevant to whatever's going on at the time, we'll answer them. If not, we can grab them at the end. Or if you've got questions at the end, feel free to ask them at the end. Entirely up to you. Also, just the nature of the stuff we're talking about, some of it might be quite private or sensitive. So equally, if you want to message us after the event, we can pick it up offline if that would prefer. Yeah.
And don't ask us to do quick calculations. Because from working in a bank, the answer was a quick calculation is normally wrong. So we won't be doing any calculations. We will just be telling you some of the things that we think you should look at.
I wonder whether you could age people by saying we're not Carol Vorderman or Rachel Riley.
Oh, that's true. Who's on countdown now?
I think it's still Rachel Riley.
Is it really?
So, it might be.
Anyway, dancing. Right.
Should we get cracking?
I think we should do.
For those that have already joined us. So welcome everybody who joined us. Thank you very much indeed. I'm Andy Acton.
And I'm Chris Strevens.
And we're two of the directors at Frank Taylor Associates. And for those that don't know, but you probably all do, we value and sell dental practices. So what we're going to talk about this evening are some of the things that we've seen that practices have done and things that we've advised our clients to do to improve your practice's profit. And improving your profit is good for two reasons. One, you get the month-by-month benefit of having a more profitable business, which is no bad thing.
It's not bad at all.
Absolutely. But your practice value is based on a multiple of your underlying profit. So not only do you get the month-by-month benefit of the profit, you're also going to enhance the value of your dental practice as well. So there's two good things. This is regardless of when you're thinking about selling your practice.
Yeah.
It's good. It's going to be good news.
And also, to be honest, we've probably borrowed some ideas from other people.
Best idea.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, always borrowed. So anyway, let's crack on because I'm conscious it is probably about 3 minutes past, and off we go. Right. So 5 ways to improve your practice profit, make more money.
Exactly.
There you go. Spend less. Sorted. Right. Thank you very much. Go and enjoy the football. No. So let's start with the things that we sort of see that we think you should happen. So hang on a minute. I'm having a bit of a technological push me button. Not much going. Maybe we'll just go with the good old. Excellent. So at the moment, I'm afraid we are in. Oh, hello. Something might have happened there. Here we go. Maybe we'll just use the button, shall we? So, right, here we go. So the first one is start at the beginning, really. If you don't understand anything and you don't monitor, it's sort of quite hard to manage, really, and to make any improvements because you don't actually know where you started. It's a bit like, isn't it? I think someone said once, if you wanted to go from, here to, I don't know, Edinburgh, you actually need to know where here is. Because it will be different journeys. So unless you actually know where your start point is, how do you actually know how to get to Edinburgh? Because I tell you what, if you start from where we are in Brooklands Park, you'd go one way. If you were in Cardiff, you'd have a different journey. So it'd be a different plan. So let's talk about effectively managing your finances. So it sort of roughly breaks down into four things, really. So for us, one of the most important things is a profit and loss account. So I would say to you, the first thing, have you ever looked at and reviewed your profit and loss statement? And it may well be that the answer is no. Because what we have found in our many years of experience is most dentists basically will ask their accountant this one question with their profit and loss account and balance sheet. And it is not, how did that all happen? It is, what tax should I pay? Now, the answer is that's a pretty good question. You've got to pay tax, but it would be really good if you understood the line items in your profit and loss statement. And we're not saying you should learn them, how much did I spend on, I know, that composite, but cumulatively, you should understand what these numbers are. Because if you don't know what your profit is, then how do you manage? And more importantly, how do you progress? Because as we will talk about, there are areas that we think you could easily be looking at. Some you could be super complicated or you could be very simple. But the answer is, I would think that the vast majority of people that we deal with actually don't look at what their profit and loss statement is and how it's made up. And we've also think a cash flow forecast. A cash flow forecast is, as it says, a cash flow forecast, which is basically, what do I think is going to happen in monetary terms? I always love telling stories because I think they're more, they resonate more. Years ago, when I used to work in a bank, I used to look after customers, and I had one dentist before online banking, and the only way he knew if he had any money was he wrote himself a check. Those of you who can remember what a check is, and that was his salary. And if his salary bounced, then the answer is he didn't have enough cash and he hadn't made a profit. So what he then did was he wrote himself a smaller check until it eventually went through. Now, that is a terrible way of planning your cash flow. So we think that you should actually look at how your cash flows work. Whether you're NHS or private or a plan provider, whatever it may be, you need to know what's coming in, because also, if you know what's coming in, you can plan and be less stressed. We've known people who have sort of done really well and then they didn't plan very well. And then they're ringing us asking, could they borrow 20, 100, 200,000 pounds to get over a cash flow hump, which in reality, if they'd have foreseen it, they probably wouldn't have been in that position. So these are like the basics, really. So what's the next thing that we should look at? So the next thing is you really need to analyse the results of financial reporting. We're having a bit of our laptop is being a bit slow here. So there we go. So analyse the results of the financial reporting to produce your business actuals, which sounds quite straightforward, but it sort of goes back to the profit and loss and the cash flow, because you should be doing it on a monthly basis. Some people will do it quarterly. Some people will do it 6 monthly. Most people don't do it at all. So the only time you actually ever see whether you made a profit or a loss was when you get your financial accounts. And I would virtually guarantee if your financial year is 31st of March, you probably won't see your accounts until maybe sometime in October, November, December, if you've got an efficient accountant. So what we're saying is that you should be able to prepare these on a monthly basis. And when you look at the the accounting softwares like Xero and I think QuickBooks and all those sort of stuff, once you codify stuff, so that means you sort of, it's a bit of a pain at the start, but it basically means you basically put a code on something like wages or Denplan or whatever it might be. And then what will happen is it links to your bank account and it will produce management information for you, which is the actuals. So really, there is no excuse for not doing it, because informed means you're informed.
Yeah.
Simple as that. Without it, you're sort of like, you don't really know what you're doing. You're a bit like a sailor in the sea without any idea where you're going, hoping wind might blow and maybe the sun will come up. So you need to have that. So then the third thing we think is really important is, how do these financial tools contribute to a business management information? And basically what we're saying is that if you know, so remember, go back to your P&L, your profit and loss statement at the beginning. That sort of gives you an accumulation of what happened in the previous 12 months, which is great, but it's historic and it's out of date the day after. 1st of April, it's not the same. But using a cash flow and then using also your actuals, which you could take off Xero or QuickBooks or whatever, you can then see what you are actually doing. Now, this means that you are now actually able to manage your business. Now, we think that's really important. We talk to so many dentists, and interesting enough, you're not alone, because we found this in the States. We went to Florida on a conference recently to talk to some dentists, and we found out that we thought, which maybe you think, that corporate dentistry in the US, everybody knows exactly what's going on. And in their dental practices, they all know, or their dental offices, they all know, because they love a process. But the reality of it was, unless you're in a DSO, so like a multiple, the vast majority of dental practice owners, like you guys, don't actually know what they're doing. And it's partly because you earn too much money. So imagine what you could do, either earning more money or earning the same money and having more time off or whatever. Because success is down to you. You decide what your vision of success is. So use these actual reports to help your business management. And then finally, we were saying that with this great confidence that you've got in actual numbers as to what is actually happening, not what you think is happening, but what is actually happening, as Andy will talk about later on, it enables you to manage and maybe steer your business performance. Andy's going to talk a bit about what's a more profitable treatment. Now, unless you know, how are you going to do anything? It is a bit nonsensical, really, because you've got businesses that are profitable and they're great businesses. They're exceedingly robust. And you guys are clinicians. And in reality, when you went through dental school, you would be lucky if they probably gave you more than 10 minutes on business. And you're expected to run this business that is probably, even a small business, is probably one of the biggest businesses on the high street, except for a large multinational. And you're sort of almost expected to understand by osmosis how it all works.
It's not fair, is it?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And I think partly because you do so well, it sort of masks that granular detail, and we're all into detail. So the more granular, as in the more you can understand about what your business is doing, the better you can make informed decisions. Now, you might decide not to make any decision at all, but that's still an informed decision. It's the fact of, rather than just apathetic or not making a decision, you are making an informed decision.
But I think that's the whole thing, isn't it? If you're going to try and improve the profit of your business, if you don't understand where you are now, how on earth can you work out where you're going to go? So that whole thing about knowing where you are at the moment.
I say it simplistically. I want to get to Edinburgh, am I in Brookman's Park? Am I in Manchester? Or am I in Cardiff? Because every journey will be different. And unless you plan that journey and monitor that journey, you won't know. And that's what the first thing is, actually understand your business.
And there's a lot of information going to be coming at you tonight. Just pick out the bits that suit you. There'll be some you'll look at and go, yeah, I do that, I've got it covered, no problem at all. Then you can move on. There's no point in kind of reinventing the wheel. But the idea is to try and cover off lots of points so that you can pick off just the 1, 2, 3 things that you can actually take action on to improve the profitability of your business. Because I remember in the early days, Chris and I went on a conference. It was a 2-day conference. We came out with 42 business ideas that we were going to implement to improve what we could do. And we realized we're never going to do that. So we started crossing them off one by one until we ended up with just 2 things, which are the things that we did. So tonight's a little bit like that in that it's a lot. So just work out the ones that you think are gonna suit you. So the next area we're going to look at is how do you identify which of the things you do that actually make profit? So Chris was talking about very high level, your accounts, kind of understanding your accounts so you can see what your income is, what your costs are, what your profit is, how do you forecast, how do you match your actuals against that forecast, and how do you interpret that information? So by going through that process, you'll understand more about your overall business. And then we thought it'd be useful to kind of break into that and say, okay, so individually, what are the things you do that actually generate the profit within your business? So to start with, it's important to understand the daily operating cost for each surgery. Because if you don't understand what it costs to run each surgery, it's then very hard to work out whether those individual rooms are making you money or not. And there's an old phrase, which is busy fools. And sometimes we can be really busy, but we're not necessarily sure that we're busy on the right things, or we're doing things that are profitable. And ultimately business is to generate profit for the shareholders, and you'll be shareholders in your own business. So whether you're a sole trader, a partner, or a limited company, think of yourself as like the investor, the shareholder. However, there are also some things you might do in the business that don't necessarily add profit, but are still useful things to have. So you may have an associate or therapist or hygienist, and you know that perhaps you're breaking even, but they still add value because it's having a clinical peer in the practice. So there can be other reasons why you do things, but this is really trying to understand what the cost of those individual surgeries are.
So you might be able to identify something you want to do that is a loss leader because you just like doing it. But if
it's choice.
You're managing again, aren't you? Yes.
You're doing it through choice. So let's have a look at how we understand what the operating cost per surgery would be. So to start with, you need to know what your fixed and operating costs are. So those are wages, premises, rent, utilities, IT. It's all the bits that go into running your building, and any loan repayments. And fixed costs mean, regardless of what you do, those costs are going to keep running. So whether you turn up to deliver dentistry, you or anybody else in the practice, these are costs that you're going to incur regardless. So you need to understand what those are. Let's call those A. And then B is the number of surgery days available in a given year. So let's put it into a calculation, which is you divide A by B. So that would give you the daily operating costs per surgery. But if we turn it into numbers, it might make a bit more sense. So let's assume that your fixed operating costs are £276,992 per year. You added those numbers up, and that's what it comes to. And you've got a 3 surgery practice. You're open 4 days a week, and you're working 49 weeks a year because there's holidays and bank holidays, and you might shut for refurbishment or whatever else it might be. But you've got 49 working weeks in the year. When you do the calculation on that, you get 588 days in a given year. If you divide your operating costs by your days that you're open by surgeries, that will tell you the daily operating cost per surgery. And in this example, it's £471. So just to be open, before you do anything, you need to generate £471 per surgery, and that will cover costs. So that's your start point, because you also want to make a profit to cover costs. It's a really good process to go through to understand what are those individual rooms cost you, because then you can then start to see what happens in those rooms and where you make profit. And as Chris was saying, you don't necessarily have to make profit on every single thing you do, but it's good to know what your costs are. So that's a useful calculation to work through to understand what those costs are. We will send you a recording of this webinar tonight, so you can refer back to it if you need to and you want to. So moving on from there, so how do we find out what the profit is on each of our patients? So you'd know how many times your patients visit you in a given year, and you know how much they spend with you each time they visit. So you can multiply those two numbers together. You now know what your overheads are, so you remove your overheads, and that's going to give you a rough guide on roughly what you're going to earn from your patients in terms of profit. This is a loose guide, but you need to kind of get a feel for what these numbers look like. When it starts to get more interesting now, it's starting to analyze what sorts of patients are the most profitable for your practice. And they can be analyzed in a couple of ways. You can look at them by patient. So you can then start to analyze, okay, so are older or younger patients more profitable?
Silver surfers, isn't it?
Yeah, it might be an interesting one. It might be interesting to look at the location of your patients. Is it the ones that are closer to the practice or travel further from further away? It might be that where did they get introduced from? Are they patients who get referred from existing patients more profitable from those that get generated through digital marketing? Or did you do a leaflet drop? It would be quite nice to know which of those patients that you're working with are the most profitable ones. What you can also do is you can also then go through the same process and say, well, okay, of the treatments we deliver, which are the most profitable? Of the hygiene treatments we deliver, is using a surgery exclusive for hygiene, given that we know that the operating cost per surgery is, say, £471 a day or whatever your number is it good use to have a surgery purely for hygiene purposes? If you are doing implants or clear aligners, what's the value of using that surgery? And later on, we'll talk about how you might be able to optimize the use of surgeries, because again, that helps in terms of building profitability. Because at the moment, we're still talking about understanding what is profitable in your practice. So we looked at the numbers to start with, and now we're trying to drill down into what's in there in terms of where that profit is generated. Because once you start to understand that, when you make changes, you can now see whether it's positively adding to the performance of your practice. So another way to look at this is you're working on a traditional basis, which is the basis you're working on at the moment. We're going through a phase at the moment where technology is coming in at a race of knots. It really
that
is.
Two-letter word is everywhere.
And of course AI is in there too. But what does that actually look like in terms of how do you leverage that? You may be familiar with dental monitoring. It's a tech-led business operating within dentistry, and effectively it provides remote devices for patients to track the performance of their orthodontics. And I was talking to one of the guys at Dental Monitoring, and he shared with me a case study. He said they had a client, an NHS orthodontist, who freed up 850 appointments in a year across 600 patients with fixed appliances.
It's massive, isn't it?
But it's a huge number. And there's a number of good things that happen in here. So we know that there's a fixed cost to running each surgery because we've worked out our operating cost per surgery is. If you've just freed up 850 appointments and you know what your average appointment time is, that's going to give you an idea of how much surgery time you've freed up. If you can replace that surgery time with new patients or bringing in existing patients, or possibly extending treatment times slightly so that you can offer a more consultative approach to your patients, there's going to be some good things that happen in there, and that could well add to the profitability of your practice. As a side added to this, and it's not around profitability, reducing the number of patients who come to your practice will also take pressure off your front desk, which means that they can then concentrate on the patients that do need to come to the practice. But also there's a genuine environmental impact on us all traveling to and from places all the time. So reducing the number of times patients need to visit your practice has a really positive environmental effect as well, so long as obviously the care that's being delivered to the patient isn't compromised in any way. And something else, as an example, is a company, Boxley. So you may have seen, and you may have one, chatbots that sit on websites. And chatbots are great because what they do is, again, it's leveraging technology to take pressure off people having to take phone calls because patients can contact you via online chat. actually now we move into a phase where actually people can ring in and still speak to an AI who's going to help them through the process so far before they need to speak to somebody. But it means that people in your practice can then focus on those patients who are physically there, as opposed to being distracted and needing to answer the phone. But also as a training tool, it can be incredible, but also capturing data, because you don't miss anything because it's all getting captured and recorded.
I was just thinking, as a takeaway for people watching, if you are a practice owner, what we will say to you is a real takeaway on this one is get 5 of your friends to ring your dental practice and mystery shop it, because you may be surprised at the results. It's a because then that might make you think, well, maybe I do need a chatbot. But mystery shop, it's so valuable, valuable.
I mean, we all think we're great, and most of the time we are, but there are things that slip between the cracks. And as Chris says, getting somebody perhaps to make that phone call and then give you their honest and genuine feedback could be quite interesting.
It could be illuminating, I think.
So I think trying to understand what of your services produce your profit, and hopefully there's a framework now in terms of how that works, and also seeing what sorts of patients and what treatment types produce a profit, and then looking at whether there's some technologies out there that could improve efficiencies within your practice, will put you on a path to having a more profitable practice. Because if you know where the profit's being generated, it maybe you can do some more of that. If you've got an area of your business that isn't producing profit, are there some improvements around systems, process, training, whatever's required to make it more profitable? And it may well be that there is some technology out there that would help you be more efficient in terms of how you run your dental practice. And now Chris is going to have a talk to you about how you might be able to improve your costs.
Yeah, when it goes back in a way to where we started with the fact of profit is simplistically income minus costs. And hopefully there's a bit left over, which is the profit, which is what you can draw. Simple as that. So we talked about income, we talked about profit and loss, how you can start to try and track it, and you talked about the best or how to effectively try and look at what you're doing, so as you know what treatments are profits you're making in your treatment. And now we're going to talk about very, very quickly about cost control, PCC. I like that. PCC. So anyway, so here we go. So the first thing is, I'm obviously not having much luck with my pushing a buttons thing. Oh, we can. Anyway, the first thing is you need to understand your cost basis. Your cost base is really very, very simple. So where do you spend your money? There's wages, obviously. You should know what you're paying people. You've got your rent, you've got your utilities. But the ones that are probably sometimes not really looked at, but they can be maybe 20-25% of your actual turnover, are the other costs. So we'll talk about these in a minute. But what we've got this thing called the Dental Data Vault, which we are going to be releasing over the next few months. And basically what this is you have access to your own information, so you know what your costs are, you know what your percentage cost of turnover. So you know your labs are, I know, 8% or 12%.
Or should do.
What? Sorry, yes, you should know what they are. We have obviously thousands and thousands of dental practices that we valued, and at the moment we are basically pulling them together to be able to effectively give you a benchmark, would be probably a good choice. So as you'll be able to tell us, you'll be able to say to us, hey, I'd quite like to know, I've got a 3-chair private practice in Shropshire. What does that look like as my sort of like the average across all the dental practices we valued? And we will be able to benchmark for you. So as you can see, are you higher, lower, or spot on? Because if you can sort of understand that, that's a real way of helping to manage. Because the reality of it is, one, you need to know, as Andy quite rightly says. But actually, if your labs are 17%, do you actually know whether that's good or bad? And the answer is, if you're on your own and your accountant doesn't know, then who do you ask?
But I think we're in a phase, aren't we? That phrase data-driven decisions seems to be bandied about an awful lot. And that's kind of where we're trying to help practice owners, isn't it?
Right, here we go. And there we go. Look at that, as if by magic. So if you want to take a screen, well, do whatever you do with a QR code. You can tell I'm old. And then go to the website and basically just put your details in. All it means is that when we've got it ready, rocking and rolling, we will just contact you and let you know, and then we can talk about what data you might be interested in.
It'll be ready within the next couple of months. And as Chris says, you can kind of tell us what sort of practice you have, and we can report back to you some average data based on practices that look like yours.
Because then it will give you an idea of management. So let's move on from that. So the next thing is, sounds quite straightforward. Review your purchases regularly. I can say that yesterday I reviewed my Virgin Media purchase and also my British Gas home care, and I saved £1,000 in an hour's phone call. Now, you may have that sort of thing, but what we're talking about here is things like your gunk and goo and all those bits and pieces. And do you actually review them? And if you don't, why not? It's simple, really quite straightforward. Here we go. Hey, worked for me this time. And then what we're also talking about is actually, how does your order process work? Is it, if you've got like just you and maybe a hygienist or a therapist or not, it's quite easy in a way, because you should, if you're regularly reviewing, you can see what's being ordered. But if you've got a process where maybe you've got more fee earners who just want to order X or Y or whatever, how does that actually get done? What is the process for it? Have you got a process, or is it just ask whatever you like? Because sometimes, I'm sure this may happen, that associates don't necessarily think about the cost implication of maybe what they are ordering. So potentially you could be reducing your profit. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to use inferior quality, but it may be that your pricing is wrong. So if your composite, for instance, is going to cost more money because you perceive it as a better one, then maybe your restoration needs to be a higher price than it was, because those two could have moved. Your price could be the same. Have you regularly reviewed your prices? Probably would be another one we would say look at. But did you then review the costs associated with that treatment? And you may not have done. So sense check your ordering process. Ensure there's a system for stock management. Sounds pretty basic. I.e. use the one that's about to run out first. Quite simple. But have you got that process in place? We were racking our brains and we couldn't remember, but we spoke to a German company, and basically what they do is in Germany is they basically do this for people, and it was something, I think it was somewhere between 7 and 10% they saved in wastage by just being able to say to people, you need to use this one, because it was all sort of coded. So it was a process. It was a process how to use it, because sometimes people don't think about that. Your whether it be your nurse or your associate, whoever gets the stuff out, they might not think about it. They just, and if it's that thing, you know when you go to the supermarket, don't they? They always put the bread, the newest bread at the back. So is it the same sort of thing, or
we've all done it at home? The amount of times, like once a year, you're going to get the spices or herbs out of the cupboard, and you realise there's one tucked in the back that's 2 years old.
I'm just thinking practically, aren't you? Let's say, for instance, you've just had a delivery. It's quite a big delivery. We're quite busy, actually. Busy. We don't really get much time, do we? So I'm going to just shove it in the cupboard. But you, as a nurse who really doesn't give a what's it in most cases, because you don't know what your profit is, so why should they? Think, I'll tell you what, I'll put that at the back of the cupboard. So as we use this first, the likelihood is it will probably go in the front of the cupboard. So therefore, that's the one that someone uses.
Yeah, and so, you're back to that system, aren't you?
Yeah. So use a process. What else have we got? So explore a reward system for effective cost management. And what we're saying here is, if there's someone or anyone in your business that you could, introduce some incentive. It doesn't have to be cash. It might be chocolate cake, or it might be a half day off or something. And I've got a great example of this. It won't happen years, but the example is, I used to work for a bank many years ago, and this is definitely going to date me and some of you lot. And they would always have blotting paper in the banking hall, because obviously one day everybody used fountain pens. but over the years, nobody ever used a fountain pen. And one of the messengers, or one of the sort of guys who just worked in the bank, they produced this thing called, I think it was called Ideas in Action, I think it was. And basically they said, anyone got any cost cutting ideas? And he said, why do we still put blotting paper out? Because all that happens is people write over it and throw it away. And they said, well, that's a really good idea. And it saved the bank about £1.5 million. And this is probably going back 40 years.
Wow.
So imagine what that is now. And they gave him a percentage of that saving. And they said, you've saved us so much money. Because it's not just the saving for that year, it's the next year and the next year and next year. So think about that. Think about that. What else have we got? Oh, that's a summary. So there we go. So what's the next thing we've got? Is bulk buying always best? Now, here we go. The answer is possibly, I think. So what we look at when bulk buying is, it could be useful for high usage items, gloves, masks, 3-in-1 tips, and also essentials with a low expiry risk, unless, of course, you happen to be Michelle, whatever her name is, Moynihan, with £68 million worth of PPE somewhere in a cupboard. But it could work for that because you got high volume and transfer through. And also what it does is it might help you avoid a small order fee, because like sometimes you order something. Well, I think any time we order, isn't it? You buy anything online and it says, oh, unless you order more than £100, we're going to charge you £7 or something. So then you order £105 worth of something. But actually, did you really need £105 worth of something? Because you just spent £5 unnecessarily, and that £5 has just come off your profit. Now, okay, you might argue that you saved £7, so technically you're £2 up, but not if you don't use it.
Yes,
because you've just basically wasted even more money. And also sometimes what it is, it's less admin time, because if you bulk order, fewer orders means less staff time spent on purchasing. It's simple, which means more time spent on doing something else, which might be cash generative. What else have we got? So when it costs more, so hello, I'm back to me £68 million worth of PPE. So basically, if you buy something big, like you got a special offer on gloves, so you've bought enough gloves to fill a room because you saved yourself 2p on a glove. You're going to have to store it somewhere. Well, maybe if you stored it in, I don't know, ShoreGuard or the big yellow storage company, that's going to cost you money. And also sometimes something we've got to be careful about is sometimes people bulk buy if you're not in control to benefit themselves. And I will give you a real life story where we had someone who's there. It must have been the materials, wasn't it? The materials bills were quite high. And we sort of said, your material bills are quite high. It goes back actually to them not knowing what the materials bill. And we said, your materials bills are really high in comparison to what we expect. And they said, are they? We said, yeah, they should be like here. And you're like, it should be X and you're Y. And we said, why is that? He said, well, I don't know really. And then when he went back and had a look through all of his purchase invoice, he basically found out that whoever was doing the purchasing was buying anything that got a special offer. So this person had got a mountain bike delivered to their home address. It was just unbelievable. And he was paying for it and he didn't know. So the answer is going back to storage costs, but be aware of what's going on. Overuse, Rick. So this is, as we were saying, you might end up thinking, that's a great deal, but you end up having more stuff and then people use it because there's more of it. It's a bit like in my house. If there's lots of wine, somehow it gets drunk. So yeah, it's an overuse risk.
The overuse risk.
Yeah, the over risk is, and then price drops, and obviously that sometimes is that you might benefit from a special offer, or there could be something, but it needs to be a pretty big one, doesn't it? Really, to help, and then. We talked about cash flow at the beginning. What was that thing? Turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, cash is king.
Yeah.
If you have no cash, you can't pay yourself or do anything. And if you buy in bulk, it might look a great idea, but you might not actually have any money or enough money, or it limits your flexibility. And then the only other thing that really we were thinking about with sort of smarter procurement strategies is track usage and optimize orders. This is what can be helpful for you to only buy what's needed, especially nowadays, because most suppliers, it's almost like just-in-time supply, isn't it? You
Yeah.
get it the next day. Now, the danger is then you're buying lots of little orders, which might cost you money. So it's a balance, but
Yeah.
it's back to what we were saying right at the beginning, and what Andy was saying, and what we're saying is that unless you really monitor, how can you manage? You have to monitor to be able to manage, otherwise you're just like guessing. Another one that's quite interesting is consider a procurement organisation. Now, it might be that what they can do is take the headache away from you, access discounted pricing, and it means you haven't bought a room full of gloves.
Yeah.
Because they've got a room full of gloves.
Yeah.
And it's their cost. But because they've managed to buy them really cheap, they can give you a discount. So you still benefit from a discount. And yet again, you can tailor it to what you require, what your practice is, what type of things do you use. These are all things to help you make better use really of what you've got. I mean, we've come across a company called, is it Denstack, isn't it?
Denstock. Yeah,
Denstock, sorry.
Raz Tijuana, Denstock.
And this basically is what he does. You know, he does cost comparisons for you, and he does it free, doesn't he? I think he does a free cost analysis and basically tells you what he could save you. Now, for me, it's a bit of a no-brainer. Give it a ring, give it a go, see what he says.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a fairly new service. But if people are interested, drop us a message and we can introduce you to Raz and you can have a conversation with them about how that might work for you.
All right, Mr. Acton, over to you for the home run, I think.
So to recap, you kind of now got an understanding of your numbers. You've got ideas of where you're making profit in your practice and how to analyse where that profit comes from based on the cost to run your practice and knowing what the surgery costs. Chris has gone through the cost side of things in terms of how to effectively manage those costs on that side of things. So now we're going to jump to the top end of that profit and loss again, because in reality, I always take a view that to improve profit in your business, you need to do one or two things. You need to contain cost or you need to increase revenue. I always take a view that I think you can only ever contain costs so far before the lemon isn't worth the squeeze. What you're going to get out of it is just not worth the work. And you could end up compromising in quality of care, quality of products, quality of services, quality of training. That's not a good place to be. So if we move to the other end and we say, okay, so what are the sorts of things you could do to improve your profit, but by growing revenue at the top end? The first one is around marketing strategies and what things can we do to improve the attraction of new patients and how we engage with them. And to start with, it's back to that same old chestnut to do some analysis and look at the different stages of when patients are engaged. Because when a patient comes and in for their first appointment, there's been so many touch points to your practice. You need to understand all those different stages and are each of those optimized. There's a notion around 0 point of truth, which is the research that patients and prospects will do before they even decide to make contact with you. And that will be looking at your social media, and we'll come on to that in a minute. They might visit your website. They may walk down a high street. They may compare you to some other practices. And all they're doing is they're trying to
Google reviews.
Yeah, the Google reviews. Yeah, I know there's been a lot of debate about that recently online around, I think Google have done a recalibration and quite a lot of practices have lost some Google reviews. Their numbers went down, which I think was disturbing for some, but I think they're kind of getting that sorted. But all of these different elements feed into the ecosystem that says, do I want to become a patient of your practice? But going back and analysing each of those touch points is really important. So it is social media, it's website, it's how's the phone answered? What does your practice look like? How does your practice compare to others in terms of look and feel? Does it feel congruent? In that, if you went into a very, very well-appointed, high-end chandelier type practice, but it was delivering an NHS contract and an NHS contract only, there would be a little bit of a disconnect that describes and feels and looks like a private practice. So everything needs to join up so that it makes sense from a patient perspective. And then once you have an understanding of that start point, there's a theme here, isn't there, about understand where you are, and then you can kind of build your plan. So whether it's building a cash flow forecast or a marketing plan, you start with understanding where you are, and then you can go from there. And there's a lot of talk about digital marketing strategies, and we are going to talk about social media and the part that has to play in developing your practice in a minute. But don't disregard the offline strategies as well, because there's a number of things that you can do in terms of being present in your local community. You know, you can have an alliance with a local gym or a local health club, or there may be a local beauty parlor, or you may be able to get involved in a local school or nursery or library, and you can be present in your local community, and all those things are offline. It might require a bit more work than digital campaigns, but it gets you to show your true self. You can really show who you are by working with your local community. So look at some of the things that you're doing that work well and do more of them. The things that you're not doing so well, drop them, but perhaps explore a couple of things you haven't tried before. Leaflet drops, a well-crafted letter. You know, we monitor and track when we send emails out to our clients. We monitor and track the open rate. We're very fortunate. We're obviously liked by our clients because we get a 42% open rate on our emails.
That's great.
And that's actually a phenomenal. To get a 42% open rate is amazing. But that means that there's over half don't even get opened. And I'm pleased with a 42% open rate.
What's the standard? It's something like 1 to 2% of a market.
Very, very low indeed. However, this evening, when you all got home from your hard day's work at the practice, and you may still be at your practice, if you received a letter that had been sent to you today, I guarantee you would have opened that letter when you got home because you'd be interested in what's inside. So the open rate of letters is pretty much 100%. The pressure's now on because once that letter's been opened, you've got to say something so compelling and interesting that they decide to take action on what's in there. But don't disregard offline. Offline can be a great place to be, but you do need to think about that messaging and that content. And then it's about trying to understand what your patients look like. So this is existing patients, but also what sort of patients you want. So depending on what sort of treatments you're delivering. So let's just say you're a practice that is heavily focused on clear aligners, composite bonding and whitening, because it's an easy one to work with. You could then profile the sort of patients that sort of treatment is going to appeal to. And it might be you say, well, actually, it's men and women between the ages of 18 and 30. That seems to be kind of the window that we think we can do quite well in. You can then design your marketing to appeal to that persona because you know who you're going after. And so you know the sorts of things that audience are going to be interested in. So you can create messaging and marketing that's going to resonate with that audience. And it doesn't all need to be about retracted smiles. It can be doing the sorts of things that would work with them. So yeah, they might take holidays with their friends. It's tapping into the sorts of things that are going to resonate with them. But going through that process hopefully helps you come up with some ideas within your practice for how you can then build a marketing campaign that will attract the right sort of patients to suit you. Again, very, very quick whistle-stop tour this is, but that's on the marketing side. And then kind of going further down on the social media side of things. It's one of those ones that it sounds really easy and a lot of people do it, but there's quite a difference between doing it and doing it well and getting good results from it and just putting a tick in the box and saying that it's been done. Building an online following is easier said than done. When we talk about an online following, it goes back to this persona. You need to know who your target audience is and who you're trying to appeal to. You also need to make sure that how you present yourself is in a consistent manner, because when people see us on a regular basis, there's a comfort in that content appearing in a regular way. So that's really important. But when you build it, it has to be built in that style. You also need to offer some value in each piece of content. So you have to show them something they didn't know before, give them some information that wasn't there before, educate them, share something special about your practice. It has to be useful because then they'll keep coming back because you're delivering more and more things to them on a regular basis. And something else it has to be, because what you hope is that the people who are seeing your social media content come and visit you in the practice. So your content has to be authentic and transparent. So when those prospects turn into patients and they come into the practice they walk into looks and feels like your social media content. So if you're the sort of person who quite likes doing fun social media, I've no problem at all with that. Go and do that. That works really well. But that has to flow through when they visit the practice. There has to be a slightly fun edge to it. If you have a really jokey, cheeky social media platform, but then they come into the practice and it's all a bit down, all a bit clinical, everyone's got their heads down, it's a bit boring. Again, we've got a little bit of a disconnect there. And then if you're going to go to the trouble of creating content and posting content, and then patients respond to that content, you must engage with them. It's a two-way thing. So if you post something and they respond, reply to their response. Create content that's engaging. Use polls, use questions and answers, create contests or quizzes. Encourage people to engage with your content, because that is the holy grail of social media. You want engagement, because once you get engagement, it gives you the opportunity for you to respond. But when people engage, their network also see their engagement. So what you're doing is you're building this spider's web of people who are seeing your content. Also, if people respond, try and get back to them quickly, because that again says we're all about good service. There's nothing worse than posting something, a response from a prospective patient or someone who saw it, and then a week later, a response from the practice or from the business. Try and get back and try and have somebody monitoring it so that you can respond on a regular basis. Also, if you're able to get content that's generated by your patients that you're able to share and they share, that is gold standard. Because if we just post about our businesses, it's one level. If you can get your patients to post about their experience on their channel, which you can then share, that's amazing. Because typically within social media, what happens is the followship that people have are generally a bit like them. So going back to that persona thing, what you'll end up with is you'll tap into a whole new world of people that you didn't know you were out there before, but it does require you to engage. And engagement is also best done. And Chris did this earlier when he told his story about the blotting paper. If you can tell stories, it resonates with people so much better than just stating facts. So think about that when you're creating your content as well. And it's also a great way of getting to people beyond those that visit your practice. I mean, sure, it's lovely for your patients to see you out there because it reinforces that bond and that relationship, but it also puts you in touch with a whole new category, because there is a really efficient way of getting to people in your local area, particularly if you use the right tags and hashtags so that you get picked up by people in your local area. And lastly, you do need a call to action. So the whole reason to post content is to make sure that something happens. The amount of people who post content on a regular basis, but they never actually say what they want people to do. So if you have an offer on at the moment, encourage them to contact the practice. If it's a new service, invite them to come and visit you. Book an appointment. So that call to action is really, really important. And sometimes we feel a little bit awkward.
You have to ask for the business,
in doing that, but you do. You have to ask for it. And we know from talking to our clients, business is hard for lots of people at the moment. There's a lot of people fighting for the same sort of business. If you're prepared to ask for it and your competition aren't, then it puts you at a significant advantage. Something else we can do for you if you're interested, and again, just drop a note or drop us a DM afterwards, is we can actually do a free social media review for you as well. So we can compare your social channels to other practices in your area to let you know how you compare in terms of number of followers, number of engagement, and how your social media profile performs. So we can do that for you. So a little bit like what Chris was saying with the dental data vault, we can access a lot of data around social media accounts, and we can let you know how you're performing and also give you tips and indications in terms of how you can improve as well. But that's just the social media side of things. The last thing we've got for you, and this is for practice owners, we've recently created the Principals Club, and it's going to be launched in the next week or two. And what we wanted to do is wanted to create a space to help practice owners, and this is independent practice owners, learn more about business, share business tips, support independent practice owners. In time, we're going to create a forum for practice owners to have conversations, a bit like we're having tonight. We're going to be doing live events and webinars and sharing information. We're also offering people who are part of the Principals Club a free business overview report. So effectively what we do is we benchmark your business in a number of different categories, and then using a traffic light system, we'll tell you how you're performing, like the areas you're doing really well, the amber areas you might want to have a look at, and the red areas that we think are of concern. And this is from the perspective of guys who valued and sold dental practices for 25 years.
And just on that one, it's not a financial one.
No.
So it's different. It's not a valuation report. It's a assessment report. It's quite an interesting one.
Yeah, it's all the non-financial areas. So things like your opening hours. Your opening hours will give you a score rating based on how many days you're open and the hours you're open. And then we'll give you that overview report, and you can take that away and you can work with it, and you can make some implement it if you wish. We also do a more detailed index report as well, which goes into 50 different areas of the business. But the idea is to try and help inform practice owners about more of the fundamentals of business. So one, hopefully you end up with a more profitable business, but also we know that owning running a business is stressful. And the more we can do to help you enjoy the journey of owning a business, the better it's going to be for you, your families, your patients, your team, better for everybody. So there's no cost to join. You can enroll in the Principals Club as a practice owner for free. We'll then start sending you some up-to-date information in terms of what's happening in the market. We can share information about your practice. You'll be able to access the dental data vault. And the idea is to try and build knowledge of dentistry from a business perspective.
And sharing.
Yeah.
Sharing.
Exactly. Thank you very much indeed. That's us done in terms of the presentation.
Boom, 55 minutes. Look at that. We are good at this. I'll tell you what, it was very quick.
It was. There was a lot of information. And genuinely, like we said, we will send this webinar to you as a recording, because you may want to go back to a couple of bits and look at it again and kind of think about how you may be able to make some of those changes in the practice of yourself. If you do have any questions afterwards, like I say, Chris and I are available. You can drop us an email and you can get that via our website. We're both on Instagram. We're both on LinkedIn. So just find us whichever way suits you and ask some questions. But we hope you've enjoyed tonight. I have.
Oh, it's been good fun. I enjoy it because it makes, if it can help our guys' businesses better. And I think this is success thing, isn't it? It's not all about money. It might be about the fact that you can work 3 days a week and have more time or in some cases less time with your family, as we've been told. But it comes back to the fact of, if you don't monitor, then how can you ever manage?
It's impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
It's like juggling with jelly.
Exactly.
Not that I've ever juggled with jelly, mind you.
Well, lovely. Thank you very much indeed, everyone, for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Good night.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Good night.